If there's one word I think I never want to see ever return in any capacity in our society, it's the word woke. Not because the word has lost all meaning, but unfortunately, that it's become a rallying cry for brainwashed individuals to keep pushing their usual nonsensical beliefs onto all of us. Yeah, this video is going to be hitting a lot of things, games, even movies like Snow White, for example. Just let me explain, alright? It's all gonna make sense by the end of it, I promise you. Anyways, the point is that woke media, in general, I guess, is trying to make a comeback. And depending on who you ask, it's either not an issue at all, or it's like the biggest red flag that people are just ignoring. Recently, we had Relooted come out. If you forgot about this game, I don't blame you, since a lot of people seem to as well, as the BBC reported here. Relooted is a game about stealing treasures back from white-owned museums with a team of black thieves. I wish I was kidding, but that's a real game that exists in the year of 2026. The cast in Relooted, they look like background extras in Black Panther, and I laugh at how much of a stranglehold that Black Panther as an aesthetic has actually had on black characters getting made even to this day. I mean, just go look at the Killmonger haircut meme, where every black character, or black passing I guess, they all suddenly had the same haircut as Michael B. Jordan's villain in Black Panther. I remember audibly groaning when I first played Spider-Man 2 and saw that even Miles Morales of all people had that Killmonger haircut too. It was so obvious that the pandering was now in full swing, pun intended, because it was a Spider-Man game, but yeah, it was true. It's coded artistic language in a nutshell, like that exists to ensure that people can visually identify something from a glance and understanding that, oh, that game or movie or show is trying to pander to a specific group of people. And by the way, I don't think that black people are really to blame for most of this. In actuality, I think the real perpetrators are very likely to be white, liberal, woke women and men who virtue signal the most without really realizing that they end up being the most racist of pretty much everyone usually. The point of the matter is how delusional and frankly pathetic a lot of this nonsense ends up feeling. It feels fabricated, not real whatsoever, and at best, performative. Do you guys remember when fans spotted that Insomniac Games and Sweet Baby Inc. screwed up in Spider-Man 2 with their own pandering when it came to Miles Morales' lineage? Remember when it's seen here that Insomniac actually put the Cuban flag as a massive painting in Miles' family home, when the poor guy was actually Puerto Rican, which is a totally different flag, and then fans spotted that immediately, and Insomniac then had egg on their face and had to go in and patch that asset to display the proper flag instead. You'd think with all the consultants these people pay top dollar for, they would be able to catch these sort of things, but they didn't. It's crazy though, because I'm going to read you the plot synopsis for Relooted, and you're gonna think that I'm lying to you. But that I'm somehow making a joke or something, but I promise you, this is the real plot of a video game that has been released in 2026. Let me read you this. This is from the BBC again. Look at this, guys. Imagine it is 2099 and the Transatlantic Returns Treaty is falling apart as Western museums find ways to wriggle out of promises to return stolen African treasures. Fed up with the trickery, artifacts expert Professor Grace decides to take matters into her own hands, and the South African knows the perfect people to help. Her grandchildren, Nomali and Trevor, and her former student Etienne in an abandoned warehouse in Johannesburg, Professor Gray sets out her high-stakes plan to break into museums and private collections and take back artifacts mostly plundered during colonial times. So you're telling me that this game takes place 70 years from right now, where technology is likely so advanced that the security systems and whatnot are so powerful that no human could reasonably ever break into them, and instead of using your voice and diplomacy to rally your cause to retrieving these artifacts, which you should do by the way, because that's legal, a black professor instead in South Africa decides that her best option as an educated person is to turn to a life of crime and get her own family involved with this operation. This insinuates that robbing, breaking, and entering, and generally just being a crime, is something not frowned upon in this Dr. Grace's life then, but instead it's encouraged and taught to her own family as something that they should push for. Like, you can't be serious. Because again, they just said this professor's grandchildren, for God's sakes, are master thieves as well. Like, how did you look at a concept featuring an all-black cast and then came to the conclusion that, you know what we need? We need to make these characters who are our heroes apparently importantly, by the way, cheating thieves who break into government property to steal things. Whether they claim they have a right to those artifacts is one thing, which I would argue you don't, because it's not like you own that artifact yourself personally. This would be like anyone who now lives in Egypt just suddenly claiming that, oh yeah, I can just go live inside the pyramid, set up my PS5 and start watching Smiling Friends or something in it because I'm Egyptian. Sure, that's how that works. This weird entitlement that a game like Relooted has is never not going to be funny to me, because it's so obviously a push by the developers to try to will that woke era back, if you will, when it's clearly not working. Relooted on Steam, as you can see here, had a peak player count of 57 people. It's now down to 25 as I'm writing this video. But either way, that's an abysmal number for a game from a new studio. If this were any other game studio releasing a game that likely to costed at least a few $1,000,000 to make, they would be freaking out at these player numbers. Relooted retails for $20 Canadian, assuming that everyone who played it at its peak of 57 players actually bought the game, which I honestly doubt, and the majority of the people playing are likely just game reviewers, let's be real, that got it for free. But for the sake of argument, if all 57 people actually bought Relooted, it means that the game made about $1,150-ish or so far, which is, well, I mean, I don't need to tell you how bad that is. Then there's hyperallergic.com is seen here. They did an interview with the makers of Relooted, and what I found interesting is that at one point, as seen here, Nyamakop, that's the development studio of Relooted, brings up how they had to secure funding. From what I could tell, South Africa has some form of funding for video game development, but a lot of it is still outsourced, and I saw a few forum posts where people were asking the same questions as to who is actually funding a game like this, and my belief is likely that this game was probably funded by outside sources. Likely westernized ones, by the way, that enabled Nyamakop to now make Relooted in the first place. Now, I can't prove this, of course, I know that, but I wouldn't be surprised if US aid was the funding majority for something like this. Since the big leak about US aid, that was last year, by the way, that told everyone how the previous presidential government with Joe Biden was funding plenty of nonsense throughout the funneling of American taxpayer money to all sorts of nonsense all around the world. It wasn't even just tied to this, it was so many things, dude. The current American government even issued papers like this one, for example, quite literally called, and here it is on screen, Cuts to Woke Programs. Their words, not mine, but as you can see, just a small sample of the things that have been cut from US aid support. Stuff like critical race theory, social justice activism disguised to dismantle what they call white supremacy, ironically funded by white taxpayer people, largely by the way, through US aid's push for diverse content creation. One of these US aid groups was the Minority Business Development Agency, or MBDA for short, which according to the American government, as I highlighted here for you to see. In addition, the Minority Business Development Agency mismanaged funds in recent years, wasting taxpayer dollars. Most importantly, last year, a US district court found MBDA social disadvantage based on race or ethnicity in its funding decisions to be unconstitutional. In spite of this, the MBDA announced that it considered the ruling unconstitutional and that it would continue to fight for its ability to practice racial discrimination. Discriminatory DEI practices are the core mission of MBDA, and the agency is fully eliminated. So why I bring this up is because groups like this were actually notorious for taking the taxpayer money of hardworking Americans and either outsourcing the funds to other countries to create content meant to push their sort of agenda all around the world. Again, they admitted to practicing racial discrimination, like that's in there, which is why now the MBDA is fully dismantled for a reason. Because generally speaking, when it comes to these sorts of practices, which has infected games, by the way, and we'll be seeing the effects for a long time still, they would continue their lunacy ever more if it meant that they could just keep funneling more money while quite literally not making any profit themselves. This is my belief that a game like Relooted is likely funded in some part by US aid or a joint program attached to it to some capacity. It's kind of just like Dustborn before it, these sorts of games that launched to basically 0 players, and yet these development teams never suffered layoffs or closures. And how does that work exactly? Because we know that if a game doesn't do well, studios downsize or even close down because profit has to be made to obviously keep the lights on. Insomniac Games, the makers of Spider-Man 1, 2, and Miles Morales, haven't had any real layoffs for years at their studio because Insomniac made games that sold very, very well, like all of the time. But when Spider-Man 2 came out, which somehow costed $300 million and then some to make, which was more money than Sony spent to buy Insomniac as a studio, by the way, after that game released to, let's say, fan disdain at its story, pushing of DEI policies, and complete Blade ruining a Peter Parker as Spider-Man, just to name a few things. Insomniac had layoffs for the first time in forever, as Forbes reported here in 2024. Insomniac was actually pissed that they had layoffs, because again, that wasn't really supposed to happen to them ever. Yet with Relooted or Dustborn, sure, they're far smaller, but their profits need to be more than $1,000 in Relooted's case to keep the lights on, obviously. Yet I guarantee you that Relooted's dev studio Nyamacomp will still be totally fine despite all of this, which tells you that, like Dustborn, the sales of these games were never really the point. It was never about making a profit, because they know these games don't make profits. They just exist to push narratives and act effectively as propaganda. And like always, these people, they don't buy the things they champion anyways. Like, look at the release of Relooted's first trailer by Epic Games' main account, no less, in 2025. Look at this. 21,000 likes on Twitter, millions of views and impressions, yet the Steam charts couldn't even cross 100 concurrent players. Like, that math is just not mathing. What astounds me is how every time a game is made for that group of people, the identity-driven types I mean, that champion these sorts of games, that yes, we love Relooted, we love Dustborn, and Kill the Justice League, and Tell Me Why, and Lost Records. And yet always when it comes to supporting these sorts of games, they never show up, do they? Not even 1,000 of these sorts of people could be bothered to spend just $20 to buy Relooted on Steam or wherever else. No, they can't even do that to support their agenda. This whole idea that these people make content for these, let's just say it how it is, left-leaning ideologue types all the time, and they never show up is honestly astounding to me. They expect you and me to be the ones who will like do the heavy lifting for them and buy Relooted or Dustborn, but I keep getting told that these games aren't for me, so why would I buy it in the first place? I'm too busy playing Souls-likes and JRPGs to want to spend my time playing a game where I steal artifacts from government museums. Apparently, you can even steal artifacts from countries that are outside of South Africa, like neighboring regions I mean, which makes even less sense to me, because why would this group ever do that? Africa is full of different groups of people, obviously, and this will make people mad, but a lot of African groups don't even like the other African groups around them. So if some South African thief were to break in and steal, let's say, an artifact from Rwanda, right? Because South Africa and Rwanda, by the way, they hate each other, and there's a whole lot of history that goes alongside that. The Rwandans wouldn't be grateful if this Relooted team would like steal a Rwandan artifact. They would likely instead sell out the South African thieves to the governments of that world they stole from, because they don't like them at all due to all the bad blood between them. Like I said, steal more than just South African artifacts in this game. Like, it doesn't make any sense to me. It's just like the whole thing feels, honestly, how do I put this? Relooted's entire premise, it sounds like a white liberal woman's wet dream. Like, you get what I'm saying? Like, some white liberal woman probably signed the checks from USAID that funded this game in the first place, and she was crying the whole time as her partner, because, by the way, these people don't call their husbands or wives anything but partner because it's gender neutral, and their partner will then hug them and say, wow, you're such a trailblazer, embezzling all this American taxpayer money to make this propaganda. Wow, I'm so proud of you. Weirdos, dude. Just total weirdos. It's incredible that Relooted also has racist caricatures of Asian people in it too, as Philip Chen, who's unfortunately playing Relooted, shows here, so please watch this clip.
I heard you were back in town.
No way. No freaking way you gotta, no way!
But I don't believe it, because I knew you would have come to see me.
Thing, I'm sorry. I was going to visit you eventually.
You'll be gone a long time. It's good to see you.
Like, they couldn't have made it more pandering if they tried, but like I keep saying, people don't show up for these sorts of things other than to really make fun of it. They just don't make money. But let's pivot for a second to Snow White, because remember that movie? Well, that bombed, as we all know, but how much did it actually lose Disney in the long run? As Forbes reported here, Snow White actually lost $170 million for Disney, and that's kind of insane, but not really surprising. And that movie, like Relooted, pandered way too close to the sun too, making people believe that Snow White, which was a traditional story about the power of love, was instead actually really about being a boss girl, and that you don't need no man to save you because you're amazing on your own. Didn't also help that Rachel Zegler pushed the idea that the older Snow White movie was about a stalker prince chasing a woman, and that this new version was about activism over what it used to be. Everything made with this modernization lens placed on it, it just ruins everything that it touches. It's kind of like I said, right? Like, these people claim not to be racist or anything, yet they continuously make actual caricatures of the very properties that they're working within anyways. Snow White losing millions of dollars is really only a surprise to, I guess, activists, but they'll still claim that Snow White found its intended audience, despite losing boatloads of money. The same way that Relooted is a success, apparently, despite making like negative money, apparently, too. And like I said, so many times in other videos too, the coded language and designs of things can easily tell you if certain kinds of consultants also worked on a game or not. For a long time, people also assumed that Relooted was Sweet Baby coded. I mean, look at it, come on now. But we couldn't prove it because Sweet Baby's name was being scrubbed from credits on purpose to hide their inclusion in these games. But like always, the truth ends up coming out because Chris Kindred, who used to work at Sweet Baby, by the way, confirmed their involvement with Relooted as seen here, where they said, did some super early design consulting on Relooted, so glad to see it finding its players, big congrats to the team. There it is. Of course Sweet Baby was involved with this. That explains the disastrous player numbers and horrible Asian caricatures in the game as well, and this is what I mean. It's like everything that gets touched by activists ends up turning into slop. Like, how did Disney ruin Snow White the way that they did? If not for any other reason that they were being gaslighted by freaks into believing that this way of doing media was actually the future when it clearly wasn't. The thing about games like Relooted is that they prove that they can only reasonably exist if every institution in the world that is in favor of such content existing in the first place, by the way, bends the laws of our world to will these things into existence. It's as if when a game is genuinely great on its own, right? It needs next to no marketing or promotion because the experience, the game itself, it speaks to the players by its simply existing. Go look at Claire Obscure, right? Sure, it had a marketing budget to a degree, but its greatest promotion was that it was a great game. And then by word of mouth, it traveled organically as more people bought and then played it as well. This is the same for Demon Souls back in the day, Dark Souls as well, Elden Ring, Black Myth, Wukong, hell, even that new game that everyone's playing called Mugenics, that's a great example of this happening too organically. If a game is great, it will find an audience. That's the point. It will live and die by its own quality. Relooted, like many Sweet Baby projects, can only live if everything is fabricated and forced to accommodate it for existing it in the first place. It is clearly not a game that could reach a sizable audience in any meaningful way because of it just being available. Having those numbers it has despite the massive push with botted likes and more, it just could not find a real audience on its own, and it proves that. That, like Snow White, like anything else really that appeals to this social justice way of doing things, fails and falls before they even get moving because there's no actual audience for these sorts of things. These ideas and concepts, they are being forced down people's throats and it's clearly not working. Again, Insomniac had layoffs for making a Spider-Man game. Spider-Man, dude, the biggest hero in the world, that shouldn't happen. But it shows just how toxic nuclear levels of bad this sort of stuff is when it comes to making enjoyable content that not even Spider-Man of all things can beat the radioactive waste, dude, that is these progressive talking points and beliefs. I'm sure, like always, the game's media will run defense for Relooted, call it an important game that must exist and all these things, but deep down they know that this game is about as natural as plastic surgery is unlike an OnlyFans model or something. It's all just fabricated and designed, right? It's pushed by groups to spread propaganda, and the fact that something like this exists in 2026 as it does, that proves that these aren't just trends, honestly. They're proving how politics and cultural posturing are still trying to shape the industry's narrative despite all the pushback that they're getting. Relooted will be championed by the usual types as a culturally significant narrative that amplifies representation and diverse voices. We've heard it before. But the normal people of the world instead will see it as a politically charged piece of propaganda that's masquerading as a video game. And look, diversity and authenticity in games can be good in theory, but when a game's assign morality to deeds like breaking into museums and that sort of stuff is your core mechanic of your game, you start to question whether you're playing a game or a political thesis instead. And then here's the real question, right? When politics dictates design and business strategy, you then have to truly ask yourselves, are we still playing games or are we just performing activism via interactive media instead? In my opinion, the mere existence of games like this this that are so obviously not being made organically, but again as chess pieces on a board of politics, makes me believe that the gaming medium, among movies and more, they are just being used to change narratives, and more importantly, and this is key, minds as well. A game like Relooted only exists to demoralize you, make you believe that you are somehow evil or wrong by simply existing, and that if you have any attachment to the institutions that house these horrible things, like how could they have these artifacts? Oh, the horror. Like, it's so dumb. It's made to make you think that you're the problem when you really aren't. I'm sick of these sort of gaslighting in games, and the fact that websites are running defense for Relooted, it just proves to me that these types of things that people want back more than anything else is that woke era, so to speak. Because it was never about celebrating games or making good movies like with Snow White. It's always been about taking the things you know and distorting them to fit a narrative, and I can't stand for that. Which makes me not very surprised at the reception to Relooted and games like it already, and they can keep trying to change my mind with stuff like this. All it's ever going to do is make me reject it even more in the future. But what do you think? Let me know in the comments, subscribe for more, thanks for watching, and please don't get demoralized by things like this. You have to keep your mind clear, otherwise these sorts of people will win, and we can never let that happen.